UFC 299. Did you guys enjoy those fights? There were some pretty exciting ones. I'm going to talk about 3 of the fights. MVP versus Kevin Holland, Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint-Denis, and of course the main event, Suga OMalley versus Marlon VERA. So let's start with MVP versus Kevin Holland. I'll admit right off the bat, I'm not a fan at all of how MVP fights. MVP has that very bladed, meaning sideways stance, with his lead leg well in front of his supporting leg. And the second thing I don't like about Michael Venom Page's fighting style is that he's constantly got his hands down at his sides and he's just bouncing up and down on his feet. Now, I suppose that's something he learned from either sport karate or taekwondo as a point fighter, and he's just developed that to the point where he's very good at it. He's also got that super long and lanky build, which helps him maintain distance and fend off grappling or takedown attempts. So that said, MVP used his rhythm and his movement to just nullify Kevin Holland. And I think Kevin Holland just fell into MVP's rhythm and wasn't able to wasn't able to break that rhythm and close distance or cut off the cage. So now, I think both MVP and Kevin Holland are what I call very instinctive fighters, where I'm sure they both drill certain moves quite a bit, but they're not like programmable fighters in which you can tell them do this move, and then do this move. They just kind of very fast twitch and kind of react instinctively to what they see their opponent doing in the ring. So whatever Kevin had his eye on, he got kind of mesmerized by that and didn't just break out of it and make his own move. I feel that against a fighter like Michael Venom Page, you have to just take complete risks. You have to be unrelentless. Of course, you absolutely must have outstanding conditioning to be able to attempt to cut off the cage on him. It's going to require a lot of energy expenditure, a lot of movement, a lot of mental energy expenditure, because you gotta be always like 2-3 steps ahead of him to try to fake him out one way and then move the other way to try to cut him off. All that said, you also have to be a bit of a kind of a pit bull mentality and not care about how good or bad you look, and just do whatever you need to do to close the distance, and then of course get MVP down on the ground. That would have been sort of, I think, the key to victory for Kevin Holland. Now, Kevin did have his moments. I don't think the loss against MVP takes anything away from him at all. I think that's a good welcome to the UFC fight for MVP. And at the same time, I'm not sure that MVP can make it to the top of the UFC rankings, only because, or especially because of his chosen fighting style. I think against a relentless grappler, MVP might find himself in some trouble. But we'll see. I mean, I look forward to seeing both MVP's next fight and Kevin Holland's next fight. One, because I think Kevin Holland is always in an interesting fight, and even though I don't like Michael Venom Page's fighting style, as they say, styles make fights, and I think he makes for a very interesting matchup against other fighters in MMA in general. Okay, so Dustin Poirier snatches victory from what seemed to be almost the jaws of death via Benoit Saint-Denis. Now, I'll admit, at the end of the first round, I thought, oh my gosh, Poirier came so close to getting submitted there. But this is MMA, and you get 0 points for coming close to getting a submission. It counts for absolutely nothing. If you get close to getting a submission and you don't get it, and you lose the fight standing up, guess what? You lost, right? And that's exactly what happened. So, really major props to Poirier. He showed us how mentally strong he is, and also how experienced he is. Because at the end of round 1, Benoit Saint-Denis had that body lock securely on him. He's fighting Dustin Poirier to try to secure the rear naked choke. Dustin doesn't stop hand fighting him from that back taken position. And then when Benoit Saint-Denis transitions to the belly down armbar, Dustin still does not give in to that submission. And then the bell rings, of course. But that belly down armbar is almost, it is, in my opinion, worse than the other traditional belly up, call it armbar, because if you're getting armbarred in that belly down position, you have nowhere to arch because the ground is there. You can't arch your back and try to get out of the armbar or alleviate the pressure on your elbow by arching or bridging, whatever you want to call it. So big W for Dustin Poirier. I think mainly because what that showed us was that just how much experience he has, and he didn't let being in a horrible position mentally break him. And then he flipped the switch between rounds 1 and 2 and knew exactly what he had to do, and he went out there and he executed. Right? He just touched up Benoit Saint-Denis for the KO, and what precision, what accuracy. That was exactly what he needed to do, and Dustin Poirier had the mental wherewithal to do it. He had the experience, the fight experience, to know not to panic in a very bad position, and he also had the fight experience to know how to flip that mental switch and just get the job done. Also, in this case for Benoit, there's no sort of, doesn't take anything away from him in this L versus Poirier. Maybe he got a little bit excited at the end of round 1, knowing, oh my gosh, I almost submitted Dustin Poirier. Maybe he wasn't able to snap himself out of that mode between rounds and kind of just focus on what exactly he needed to do for round 2. Or maybe he thought he was going to just do exactly the same thing again and then get the victory that way. But in either case, I think it's definitely a learning experience for Benoit Saint-Denis. And what that shows us, I think, is in spite of having that incredible mental fortitude that anyone who's in the special forces must have, there's also an element to the fight game called fight experience, actually in the cage, under that kind of pressure, and then of course technical experience of just having hours and minutes and repetitions under your belt. So great win for Dustin Poirier. I mean, fans already love him, but I think he just secured himself another sort of reinvigoration of his ascent to the top again. So I look forward to seeing both men fight again soon. Finally, the main event. Well, Suga Sean pulled it off and got the W versus Marlon VERA in their rematch. Now, I will admit that I'm not really a huge fan of either Suga Sean or VERA as fighter personalities, but I do have a ton of respect for both of them as fighters. And Suga Sean just did exactly what he needed to do, which was like set a pace, set a rhythm. Cheeto was just never able to break that rhythm, and do what he needed to do to get the W. Now he got pieced up quite handily by Sean O'Malley, who just used, again, timing, feinting, rhythm, distance control, and accuracy of his punches, and then of course that hellacious knee, but accuracy of his strikes to just discourage Cheeto. And it kind of looked like Cheeto was a little bit mentally broken, or not completely broken, but just had kind of given up somewhere after a couple of rounds. Now here's one question I do have, which is what was the game plan that Cheeto Vera and his coach came up with going into this fight? Because just from observing the fight, I couldn't really tell what it was. And if they didn't have a solid game plan, that doesn't sound like a world-class professional fighter to me. And knowing what you know from the first fight, I think you could anticipate how Sean O'Malley's going to deal with them a second time around, and then prepare accordingly. So maybe you guys can help me out with this. I couldn't hear what Vera's coach, Jason Poirier, was saying in the corner, but it sounded to me like he was giving him very general advice. And if that's the case, then that is a criticism I have of Vera's corner, because when you're getting tagged up and hit in the head, when you come back to the corner, you can only absorb maybe one or two, really just one solid piece of specific instruction, whatever it is, like throw the jab right hand and then go for the double. I mean, whatever it is, it's got to be clear, it's got to be brief, and you'll probably have to say it a couple times for that to sink into your fighter's head, because they've been touched up a little bit, they're a little bit dazed, and they got to process that and then go visualize it and then go out there and do it. So you got to keep it super simple and super specific. Maybe Poirier gave that to Vera and I just didn't hear it, but you guys tell me, because I couldn't really make that out. So hats off to Sugar Sean. Now, I had the commentary turned off while I was watching it, but I understand after the fact that people were saying masterclass and virtuoso during this fight. Well, I could maybe go with the masterclass in terms of just the striking hand game. Virtuoso, not quite, because I tend to reserve that for fighters with a lot more experience, meaning decades upon decades. So, for example, I would give Rickson Gracie virtuoso status. I would give Gokor Chivichian virtuoso status, particularly in terms of grappling and the whole leg game, for sure. Gokor can do things with his legs like Gokor can use his legs like how we use our arms. He can submit you with his legs alone, not even getting his hands involved with tying up your limbs. So that is somebody who's a virtuoso to me, who's just able to do things that we think that we watch them do it and you go, how the heck, that's impossible. How did he just do that? The term applies to musicians and artists alike. Same thing. I mean, I've looked at works of art, say by somebody like Rembrandt or even one of my college professors, and you realize with a single line that a single stroke, like they didn't take the pen off the paper, that was one continuous line that they just drew, and they nailed it in something that would take the rest of us like multiple attempts to nail. Or, for example, when you draw the side of someone's face turned at like 3/4 or 7/8 profile, it's a hard thing to nail in one line, but if you're a virtuoso, you're able to do that. So I don't quite think Sugar Sean has earned virtuoso status yet, but that doesn't take any shine off his W, because he went out there and he did exactly what he needed to do. He didn't get out of pocket. I mean, I know, of course, everybody always says they want the KO, but he didn't let himself get out of control and take too many chances and do something foolish that Cheeto could then counter. So it's a good W for Sean. I don't think that Vera looked horrible in the loss, but I do again wonder, like, hey, what was your game plan going into this? So again, I would look forward to seeing both men in their next fight. Who do you want to see Sean O'Malley fight next? Do you want to see him stay there at that weight division and take on Merab, or do you want to see him move up a weight division and challenge Ilia Topuria? How did you enjoy the fights for UFC 299? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much.